Hi, John. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
We were going to have a chat about ethical leadership today,
Yeah.
because I know you've written something new in the book, Transpersonal Leadership in Action, which is our most recent book at Leadership.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. I think it's chapter 3, which is really an update of a white paper that I wrote in and published in 2016, which I think has had something over 30,000 downloads.
Wow,
So
that's
it's
pretty
been
good.
quite, it's been of interest to a lot of people.
So, what is so important about ethics? I mean, it should be obvious, but it clearly isn't because we see ethical scandals around us all the time. And what are the business benefits of being ethical on that transpersonal journey?
Yeah. Well, I think that just answering those questions, I think there are two things. In terms of ethical leadership, I think we need to understand um, that we've got to differentiate between ethics and morals. And ethics are sort of really following our fundamental values, what we really believe in, and often we don't bring those to full consciousness. And so we tend to follow what are the morals, and morals are related to the culture of an organization. So as we see at the World Cup at the moment, we see, a lot of tension between what is accepted as in a country versus what other people feel is right and wrong, and how we do things differently. So that's the first thing, is to understand that ethics is not necessarily about the rules in a particular country, but fundamentally what are the values behind that. And then secondly, about what is the advantage to an organization. Well, it's quite interesting that a little while ago, when we did a workshop with the senior leadership of a major company, we asked the senior leadership to each list what they thought were the main attributes of ethical leadership. What were the main advantages of ethical leadership, and what did they need to do? And they came up with this list of 14 characteristics. And then we asked them the question, and how many of those are good for business? And they answered, when they went through them, that all of them were. So it's a misunderstanding, a misnomer that this sort of historical mindset that we should leave our ethics at the door when we come into the office, because business is more important. Well, actually, in today's world, business is all about being ethical.
So, give me one example of how an ethically responsible organization would deal with some of the situations that we've seen in the press, whether that is carbon emissions or responsibility towards climate change or anything else. Can you think of an analogy or a story that might illustrate that for people that are listening?
Um, well, I think the probably the most famous case about emissions was Volkswagen, um, when they they misled um, everybody on the true emissions that were coming out of their cars, and that in the end, it was much more damaging to the organization. I mean, I think that they've recovered from it now, but at the time, it was much more damaging to the organization than the actual cost that would have been incurred if they'd have been honest.
Mm. So I guess it comes in terms of reputational value, reputational damage, impact on your marketplace, and repercussions in terms of staff loyalty, et
Yeah,
cetera, et cetera.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think that it has an impact on the culture of the organization as well, because you know, if you imagine that you are working for a company that is being taken for court for being not only illegal, which is bad enough, but also unethical. it's going to have a tremendous negative impact on morale, which is also going to have an impact on performance.
I guess the last question I have on it is something you touched on, talking about the World Cup, the kind of difference between morals and ethics, because I think a lot of people do use those words interchangeably.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And in fact, if you go to one dictionary, you'll find morals describe the way we define ethics, and vice versa. And if you go to another dictionary, so there's no consistency between how morals and ethics are defined. So that's a complication to start with. So what we've done is we've decided that, how do we define it? And based on that definition, we see ethics at a higher level than morals. Morals is something that's based on conviction, based on history, based on convention, and are the sort of the rules and culture within a particular culture or organization or country or whatever, where our ethics are more pure, based on true values. And that's why it's so important to bring your own values to full consciousness, so that you can evaluate morals.
So I guess, my take on it is that ethics are of a higher order than morals, because morals change as society changes.
Yeah,
Once upon a
absolutely.
time, women had to be dressed and covered everywhere, and these days, especially if you go up north and you look at the girls out on a Saturday night, they're barely dressed at all. How they don't freeze is beyond me. But that's a morality thing, and that is flexible and changes with the times. Whereas, think ethics in terms of murder, deliberate murder is always wrong wherever you are.
Yeah. Well, I think gender orientation and racism are probably the two greatest areas of complexity in today's age, where there is so much hidden bias, even if the rules are permissive or complementary or supportive.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about, and finding a way to make sure that ethics are embedded into the fundamental DNA of the organization, rather than simply compliance, is clearly something that is crucial. Because I remember we had a situation once with a client where over in Africa there was a different moral code. And it caused an awful lot of problems for them as a global organization, because whilst the local people were following what was a normal local code, it was not aligned with the values of the parent organization.
But the problem was that even after that, the serious fraud squad required that organization to make some real changes, but those changes were about compliance. They were all tick box. They didn't change the culture of the organization. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what the situation is now, but I'm not sure that solution, or that remedy, was an effective solution, because they didn't deal with the culture.
Yeah. So thank you very much, John. I think a lot of food for thought there, and hopefully this will be a useful start for discussions for those who watch and listen to it.
Okay, and I think the thing is, there is a tremendous amount of data, and also reference to philosophy, particularly Aristotle, in chapter 3 of the Transpersonal Leadership in Action book.
That's great. Thank you, John.